My name is Rey Arcenas with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. Today is Thursday, May 16th, 2024, and I'm conducting an interview for the UF Student Government Collection. I'm here today with Oscar Santiago-Perez at the One Button Studio at Library West. Could you please provide a brief introduction of yourself and your accomplishments in UF Student Government?
Yeah, so as you stated, my name is Oscar Santiago-Perez. I am a recent graduate of the University of Florida. I majored in my time in college in both political science and criminology, with a minor in mass communications and a certificate in political campaigning. And some of my achievements / accomplishments during my time here were mainly getting elected twice to the Student Senate, serving as the deputy leader within the party that I was affiliated with, which I'll get into later, and then also serving as the Senate President for the Student Senate. Additionally, I served in various other student organizations here on campus. I also served as the treasurer for the Pride Student Union, served as an assistant director for the Hispanic Latinx Heritage Month organization. I also served within the LGBTQ+ Presidential Advisory Committee. As a student member, I served as the founding member and a treasurer, as the inaugural treasurer, there you go, for Begging for Wellness. And I also served within the Volunteers for International Student Affairs, or VISA, as the external vice president and for a time president, but yeah. I think that is most of my stuff, yeah.
Sounds great. All right, so could you describe your upbringing and what brought you to UF?
Yeah, so I was actually born in Puerto Rico. I wasn't born in the United States, like mainland. So throughout my entire 15 first years of my life, I lived in Puerto Rico. I was raised growing up, like mainly speaking Spanish, but my mom was very passionate about the fact that I learned English, so that I could be able to come to the United States mainland if need be, and that I would be well equipped to speak English. And so as a result, she taught me a lot of English when I was growing up, and as a baby, I basically was taught both languages. Then eventually she enrolled me in a private bilingual school, and that helped me refine my English skills there. And so throughout that time, this private Christian school was the school I went to for the entire time I was in Puerto Rico. And so I was raised pretty religious for the most part, albeit I'm not religious today. And so this helps form who I am today, because without that foundation, I probably would not have made it here, because I think that in Puerto Rico, the education system is not that great, especially public education. So having that opportunity and that privilege to go to this private school, thanks to my parents' ability to, have that foresight, is what led me to be able to transition to the United States once I had to leave, because in 2017, a hurricane came to Puerto Rico and destroyed it, and Hurricane Maria. And this hurricane did devastating damage. It was the worst hurricane in almost 20, 30 years in the island. And so it left many portions of the island without running water, without electricity for months. I stuck through most of it until February of 2018, because my dad had moved out of Puerto Rico way before the hurricane came, and so he was more stable, and my mom and I thought it was the best decision to try to move to a more stable environment than stay in Puerto Rico that was still, at that point, just um, just 5 months after, was still reeling from the effects of the hurricane, and so I lived in Ohio for a bit. Then, after some issues with my dad, I moved over to Florida with my mom again, and so then I went to high school here in Florida, finished my high school degree, and so I graduated during the pandemic in 2020, and when I was looking for colleges to apply to, I was looking for mainly like in-state schools, but I was also trying to apply to some out-of-state schools, and I landed on UF mainly because of the financial aid package that they offered me. It was probably the best package that I got from all the colleges I got accepted to in Florida, and also just believed that the University of Florida had the prestige and the honor of at the time at least, that it was probably the best school I could go to from the ones that I had been accepted to in state, and so I picked UF as a result. And so yeah.
All right. So now that you're at UF, how did you get involved or interested in UF student government?
Yeah, so in high school, I was interested in being in their SG equivalent. So I served as my senior class's secretary, and throughout that role, it was very much just planning, party planning kind of thing. So it wasn't as big or as powerful as the U.S. student government is, but that sort of foundation is what got me interested in trying to get involved in SG. Freshman year, I didn't get involved because of COVID. I was not trying to, get myself infected or trying to really it was just a weird time for everything. So I think that as a result, I didn't bother. But I did follow SG, and I did learn about at the time, the Inspire Party was dying, so there was a new party, then two other parties were also joining in the fray against the Gator Party. And so I quickly started to learn about what I read through the Alligator and just my own research through Reddit. I was able to find a little bit about how the power dynamics functioned within SG, and so then eventually, once I had moved from my dorm to off-campus apartment for the 2021 school year, or 2022 school year, someone from the Change Party reached out to me as saying that they thought I'd be a great fit within the party and that I should apply. And that sort of was the push that I needed to sort of get involved. And then I mulled about it a few more days because there's this period called slating, and there's a few days you can go and register to run for office. So I took a few days before I actually went to do that, and once I went in, I did my interview for the Change Party, and I got selected, and then I ran, and I won.
All right, so what made you choose to run with the Change Party instead of the Gator Party or any of the other parties that existed on campus?
Yeah, so I think the main motivation for me, I mean, although the DM on social media was a push towards it, I think what made me finally choose to run was actually a pretty selfish and self-motivated reasoning. It's because I realized that the way the districts worked, I could win the seat that I was running for. I actually did not feel like I probably would have ran if I thought I would lose. So if it weren't for the fact that I had looked into historical data regarding the district I was in, and for reference, like I lived in District D, I still live in District D, or what used to be District D actually, and this district encompassed the 32608 zip code, and so because of the fact that I had looked into historical data showing that parties that were not affiliated with the Greek life or slash system party, I saw that the district went towards the other party, there we go. And then that was like the reassurance I needed to sort of pick to run finally, because I was like, okay, there's a good chance I can win this. It's not going to be like a me losing situation. And I settled on them. Additionally, I also just really resonated with the message of the party rather than other parties that were running within that year, because there were other parties aside from the Gator Party running, and I also chose not to run as an independent for same reasons, similar reasons. But what drove me towards the Change Party was mainly the fact that the party had a progressive message, and so as a result, I felt that resonated with my own political views and my own identities, and so I felt attracted to wanting to be a part of that and wanting to also like sort of the belief of like I can make change within that if I felt that it wasn't up to my par. So yeah.
So you mentioned the system, the political machine that controls UF. So how did you get to learn about the system? Is this part of your initial research during the pandemic when you were still sort of sussing out UF student government? And what role did the Bradshaw papers have in learning about the system for you?
Yeah. So it was through Reddit that I started to like find out a bit about the system. And I don't remember when I found the Bradshaw papers, but I know that I did take the time to read them. That might have been over the summer before, or it was either the summer before or after I was elected, one of those two periods that I read the Bradshaw papers. And that's when I finally like got to like understand and like realize how entrenched the Greek life dominance within student government is at this institution. But before I read the Bradshaw papers, it was very much just the like elementary knowledge of how the system functioned. I know that through Change as well, we tend to pass out or pass around the Bradshaw papers. We have a link to it, to a Google Drive that we typically make available to anybody who asks. And I think that it was that way actually that I got access to it. So yeah, it was definitely then after I was elected. So, but yeah, basically I think that what made me choose Change for sure, rather than just like trying to make my inroads within the system, was definitely just like my values, because I am Hispanic, so there was a possibility for me to join the system through HSA or through the Hispanic community blocks, and so and in fact I had a friend who was trying to nudge me towards the system, but I stick by my own values simply because I didn't feel like the system represented what I believe in and didn't want to feel tokenized by them, because I don't think I would have reached my full potential within the system and would have been held back simply because I wasn't part of Greek life, nor was I interested in joining Greek life. So yeah. but definitely being in change helped expose me a lot more of how the system worked. But prior to that, it was very much just what I had read on online, Discord, or Reddit otherwise.
All right. So, can you talk a little bit about the Change Party? Do you know a lot about how it started? You mentioned Inspire Party was falling apart and Change Party was coming up. Sort of how that break off happened.
Yeah, so I wasn't there obviously within the party, but I was made privy of a lot of the details. So basically, this is to what I remember, to the extent of what I remember. To my knowledge, it was the fact that the Inspire Party was basically ready to dissolve after fall 2019, mainly because the three individuals who were leading the party, Ashley Grabowski, Ben Lima, and Zachary Ambrose, were going to be graduating and going to law school. So they wouldn't be dedicating a lot of time to the party. And so, to what I know, it's that they didn't feel confident that other people could lead the party forward. And so by spring 2020, they were ready to pull the plug on Inspire. However, they were able to convince membership within the party was able to convince them to at least run one more time for that election, and so they allowed the party to still run for that election, and that election yielded 20 seats for them, which pretty respectable, especially after winning in the fall. But then after that, they knew for sure that I was not going to continue. And membership within the party was pretty split. There were people who were pro continuing the party and some people who were just siding with Ashley Grabowski, Ben Lima, Zachary Ambrose, who were the original founders of Inspire as well. So there were people separated into these two camps, and so eventually the party president just chooses to not hand over the name. Like, that's officially how it dies, because they just refuse to transfer the name to anybody else because the codes allow for a right of first refusal and to the previous party president. And so the previous party president was like, no, I'm not going to give the name anymore to anybody. Nobody can register Inspire. So they were forced to pick a new party. And so Colin Solomon, Ryan Wilder, and at least those two were the main people who were at least front and center towards this new party change, were determined to run a new party for this election, and so they chose Change. So fall 2020 rolls around, and you have Inspire collapsing, and then you got two other parties running as well in that election. But Change is by and large seen as the successor party for the indie movement. And so, yeah. I don't recall any more details right now, but there's definitely more details that I've been told, but nothing that I can recall at this moment anymore.
All right. So moving to your first year when you were elected, fall 2021, can you describe what that was like and what that term was, serving as a senator for District D?
Yeah. So during that election, the party actually didn't have a full slate for that district. We only had 9 people running, and 3 of them were not even actual candidates. They were just quote unquote slate fills, which is just like finding people who are willing to put their name down on the ballot and just run and don't do anything else afterwards if they win or lose. So we officially had a caucus of 12 elected, but really it was 9. And so In that election as well, the party leadership was very pessimistic. As I came to learn, the party leadership believed that that election was going to be a wash and that we were going to completely not win any seats at all. And that's what they were expecting, no seats at all. Because the leadership had believed that because of COVID, that things had changed dramatically, and that because during COVID, the system used mail-in ballots to request it to their sorority and fraternity houses, and they forced their members to fill out the ballots there in the houses. And so there was no way to win the election, allegedly. But then one former Inspire member came back from Saudi Arabia, and he brought the sort of insight that no, this isn't going to be the case. His name is Mohammed Faisal, and so he was like, "This isn't the case. This isn't happening anymore. They almost got in trouble for this. Like, so you probably might win some seats." And the party leadership was like, "Nah, I don't believe that." But eventually, we did win seats, and there wasn't really a structure as to what to do because they just, even though the party president at the time was a former Inspire senator, she didn't really give us enough resources or knowledge to really like build ourselves up as a new caucus. That first meeting we had as a caucus as well was very chaotic because we just didn't have any idea of what we were doing at this point. And that meeting, we had the 9 people, and so one of the people who was elected was a former Inspire party member as well, and he hadn't won a seat before, but he was involved in Inspire, and his name's Spencer Gorelick, and basically, just to recap that meeting, he introduced himself as though like he had been around, but he wasn't actually around for campaign, mostly because he was busy doing his master's work, but sort of introduced himself as an authority figure within the meeting, and one member objected to just this idea of having one person, this person who had really not been involved within the party, just kind of trying to lead this caucus, because essentially they were just going to try to appoint people within the caucus as the leadership of the caucus, and that didn't seem democratic for some people, and so they demanded an actual election, and we held an election for our party leader and our deputy leader. The results of those elections were that Faith Corbett was elected party leader that election, and then Gabrielle Adekunle, who would later be known as Shola, and I would refer to them as Shola, Shola Adekunle was elected as the deputy leader. Then the next meeting, or the next day, when we go to Senate, we are instead presented with the, actually this was 2 days after, because I think it was a Sunday. Then 2 days after, we come to Senate and we find the petition to fill out for party leadership was switched with Faith now being the deputy and Shola being the party leader. And so I didn't really question it. I just signed on. I had my personal grievances with Faith at the time, but we're good friends now. And so I was like, okay, happy to sign off. And then later I came to learn that it was party leadership that had basically pressured the switch up in leadership for the caucus. Unelected individuals were the ones running around and picking people within the party to run it, or within the caucus to run it. This is an important thing for me to mention because there is a trend of party leadership within caucus, or party leadership within Change Party running and dictating things around in the caucus side, which is just like the senators. So so that meeting starts, and that it was a double meeting, so goodbye speeches, validation results, things get validated, and then so next meeting starts in that same night, and then we're forced to basically vote for the two Gator Party people who were running because they told us that we couldn't abstain unless we had a conflict of interest, and we were just unsure of like how anything really worked, so we were just like, okay, we'll just accept this. And basically that first year was marked by like just being bullied around by the most part by the Gator Party. Especially that first like term, like the first from fall to spring, the party leader actually was the current student body president, John Brakeman. He was the party leader of the Gator Party during that term, and I just remember him as a sort of ruthless kind of I don't give a fuck about your opinion kind of guy to the minority party. Just like, I don't care. I'm going to do whatever I want kind of thing. And so really most meetings were just 30 minute, 1 hour affairs where we just like sat down, heard some public comments. Any votes were just previous question, which just means we skipped debate, and then we went home. Like, it was not a fun time out that first like stretch. Then in spring, we lose pretty badly. We got only 5 seats that election. So our caucus grows from a grand total of 8 to 12 people because one of them was yet again a slate fill. And funny enough, that slate fill did run again in spring 2023. And they were yet again a slate fill and did not show up to Senate. Go Vetman. Basically, so our caucus grew to 13 on paper, but really it was 12. So we're back again to 12. And so, yeah, I mean, that second stretch was just another, like, uneventful, inconsequential time. Like, we just, at least from spring to summer. So from spring to summer, it was just like we elect the new Senate leadership. Yet again, Change Party does not pick a candidate for Senate President or pro temp. So we go 2 elections, 2 Senate leadership elections in a row without picking any nominees for our side. But we did pick one person to be a member at large. It was Faith Gordon. And she ran for both. And she was very impressive for the member at large 1 and pretty competent for member at large 2 election. But unsurprisingly, even though she did a much better performance in the member at large 1 against her opponent, which, I mean, not gonna drag that one out too much, but basically, I think that once I saw the Gator caucus completely ignore reality and just vote for their candidate because they were probably told to, that's probably my first indication of I see what I'm in now. Not that the previous semester of getting previous questioned all the time wasn't an indication, but that was really when I lost any faith of wow, these people have no clue what they're doing, huh? So that's really when I realized that the quote unquote backbenchers, the people who aren't in leadership, aren't really like, they don't care, or they don't pay attention, or they just are blindly following whatever they're told. That was my first like light bulb clicking in me about that fact. So then summer started, and so for spring we elected Shola yet again. Well, Shola got elected finally for party leader by the caucus, not by party leadership. And then Spencer got elected for deputy leader. I was also elected into the caucus caucus e-board as legislative director. And in that role, I tried my best to help people within caucus to write legislation and to get things done through legislation or through initiatives. And so, yeah, that time was also when I had lost yet again to, that was my first time losing in party leadership or caucus leadership, because I ran for party leader at the time, and I lost to Shola. Also, another thing I forgot to mention, I was in party leadership for the Spring 22 campaign. And after that campaign, I would not be involved in party leadership until basically my senior year. I can go into details later of how that was as well. But basically then summer started, and after Shola and Spencer both left, we had to do another election for party leadership. And so this time I run against Faith without any other third person running, and that time I lost yet again party leadership. And so I don't think I even bothered for deputy leader, and Mohammed Faisal got elected deputy leader. So it was Faith and Mohammed as the top two within the caucus, and that sort of brew some resentment in me because I was like, I thought I was more competent and fit for the role, but alas. So that sort of led me to reach out to some people to try to, like, I don't want to say cause chaos, but I want to say to stir some things up in the pot. That's when I started to get more in touch with Alfredo Ortiz, which was a member of the independent movement, but is not affiliated with any of the major independent parties throughout his time at the University of Florida. He's consistently ran third parties, which have had varying degrees of success. None of them have been electorally successful, but in terms of ideologically successful, there are jury's out on that one. But I digress. Basically, I relied on his advice for a bit during that period, because I wanted to try to prep myself up for more leadership, and also I felt like it was a good sort of mentoring experience so that I could gain more knowledge and experience in working within student government to try to become more effective within the position and within the entity. So So I made sure that how do I phrase this? So basically, during this period, I sometimes would be acting on my own rationale rather than acting as an agent for the Change Party. So there were some things that occurred during this summer. So for example, there was a whole censure against the Senate president at the time, Elizabeth Hartzog, because of her decision to cancel the Senate meeting because she wanted to travel to Israel, which, well, no comment. So yeah, Alfredo filed a case about that, and essentially, through the Senate side, we wanted to try to hold the Senate president accountable for, blatantly canceling Senate for what seemed to just be a vacation trip rather than serving the student body. And so I pushed within the party within the caucus to try to pursue this censure within my role as a member of the party or the caucus executive board. And so essentially we did that and we filed the censure. It did not go anywhere because the committee that handles censures, the Rules and Ethics Committee, was stacked with members of the Gator Party, and so they were able to successfully block it. Then afterwards, we had the whole Dobbs v. Jackson decision, which brought to the limelight or brought to the forefront of a lot of people's minds just the fact that abortion rights are in peril again. Not that they weren't before, but it brought it to a lot of people's attention that, a right to abortion was never really secured, and that we need to do something to make sure that we can secure it. And so, with the help of Alfredo, I authored a bill that got some considerable attention from right-wing media outlets to sort of reimburse students for their expenses related to pregnancy-related healthcare. Probably still my favorite case, or my favorite bill that I wrote was that one. And so there was also a campaign to get students to also email the judiciary chairman at the time, which was John Brakeman, who, as I stated before, would later become student body president. He was serving as judiciary chairman for the spring term, and many students sent me emails, basically imploring the committee to support the authorization. Eventually, the authorization would get killed in the Judiciary Committee, mainly because of John Brakeman's reasoning, which was just that it would violate HIPAA and that there were quote-unquote separation of powers issues with the bill and how it was written. And although I still disagree with the Judiciary Chairman, or at the time, and the current student body president, on his reasonings with that bill, I did file a Supreme Court case. I think that was my first, or one of my firsts, that I filed against. There were cases relating to the Judiciary Committee, so that was one of my first ones that I filed, period, and one of the first ones I filed against the Judiciary Committee, specifically John Brakeman. But Alfredo helped me write that, and eventually, because of that experience, I was able to later write my own briefs for my own cases. That was sort of the beginning of me becoming this well-versed individual who could not just use the legislative branch to achieve my goals, but try to use the judiciary branch tools to achieve my goals, which I can't say is true for a lot of people because they don't really have the legal knowledge or the legal mindset to try to pursue cases through the judicial branch, simply because, I'll be frank, being in the law is not an accessible, it's not an accessible body. It's not accessible to a lot of people. That's why a lot of people need lawyers, and even getting a lawyer is difficult. But and because of my interest in the law, I felt determined to try to pursue this regardless, because I like the law, so I just really wanted to have that experience. And so eventually that case there was oral arguments for that case, which ultimately the Supreme Court struck down and ruled in favor of the Judiciary Committee and John Brinkman. But that doesn't mean that I didn't succeed in the Supreme Court in other cases, as I will allude to later. Then there was also, I did file a censure case against John Brinkman because of misapplication of right criteria. Didn't go anywhere. And that summer concluded with a fellow member of the Change Caucus almost getting censured, but it got tabled indefinitely for outrageous reasons, honestly. Alleging sexism and ableism, which I'm not gonna talk about that on their behalf, but but that basically was sort of the conclusion of summer. And then fall came around, and we had an apportionment map that was presented, which will be relevant later, and by John Brinkman, and there was also an associate justice who was nominated, who would later become acting chief justice for quite a bit, because she never got confirmed, from the Federalist Society, which, members of the Change Caucus and some members of the public were concerned because of the fact that the Federalist Society works in ways that lead to the deprivation of rights for many individuals in this country. And I mean, if that says anything about their work in a student government level, we can imagine that deprivation of rights can occur also for students, and to make it also more inaccessible. And she did get confirmed, but that was not before the Judiciary Chairman had threatened to impeach all the senators who voted against her because they stated that she was a right-wing crazy, because that violated the anti-discrimination clause for political discrimination. Needless to say, we weren't wrong about some of the deprivation of rights that occurred, but also you can't impeach senators is another fun fact. But I wouldn't expect much from John Brinkman. Anyway, so then I ran for re-election after mulling whether or not to run with the Change Party or with another party that was involved in that election, basically because of my affiliation or of my ties with Alfredo. I was and also just things that occurred in the Change Caucus internally, especially with regard to the individual who almost got censured from our party. Just issues there that probably could have led to me defecting and probably not winning my election again. But I stuck through with Change, and I ran for my second term, and I won. So that concludes my first term.
All right. So during your second term, you were elected fall 2022, and then in spring 2023, Change Party won 2 back-to-back elections. So could you describe sort of why you think Change Party won those elections back to back, as well as sort of what it was like during that term?
So I think that it was a combination of things during that fall 2022 election that led to us winning, but that included the help of, Accent Speakers Bureau bringing in a very, let's just say, controversial, I think that's a good phrase, good word, controversial speaker named Josh Richards, who is a TikTok star who also has allegations of sexual impropriety, and he allegedly flashed his genitals, or at least flashed his underwear to a live stream, which tends to include a lot of minors simply because of the base of individuals who watch his content. That sort of sparked an outrage within some students, especially because we found that they paid him $60K to come. And and then there were some people who made memes about it, some people who were very disappointed in that decision, and the Change Party did capitalize on that to push for our party to serve as hey, we don't support this. This is not something we should be doing. And so that was part of the reasons why we were able to mobilize students to win that, for us to win that election. I think another part of it was just the fact that the Gator Party started to actually engage in negative campaigning against the Change Party. So the aforementioned individual who I mentioned got censured in the summer, he was the subject of how do I say this? He was attacked by the Gator Party because he had raised his voice at a female senator, but they portrayed it as though he was yelling at the senator, and so basically they made them a caricature. Basically leaned into tropes of racism and honestly homophobia, an intersection of the two. I'm trying to think of the word, but it's not coming to mind. They leaned into tropes that come from that intersection of being queer and Black, and so many students realized that and sort of did not appreciate the fact that this individual was being targeted for this as well. Additionally, they demanded that he drop out of the slate. One small complication, the deadline to withdraw from the slate was the week before. So there was no way for us to remove him, even if we wanted to. And I do remember that the party had also had discussions on whether or not to remove this individual. They didn't remove him. But that, ultimately he won his election, and he was able to later succeed in other ways in student government. So in a way, vindication once he won. And so what else? I think that also part of just the whole Roe v. Wade overturning also helped, as we talked about issues relating to like trying to make contraceptives more accessible throughout campus, and also touting our work that we had done towards this goal was also influential. And I mean, yeah, so those were like sort of factors that led to us winning that fall election. Then in a week, literally 1 week after that election, or I think 1 week after, no, yeah, it was a week after the election, we get the great news that we have a new finalist for the president of the university, and it is announced that the sole finalist is Ben Sass, our current president. And so the funniest thing about this was the detail that the Gator Party student body president, Lauren LeMasters, was part of the search committee that essentially recommended unanimously Ben Sass. And the fact that it was unanimous also meant that she had voted in favor of him to be recommended. So that meant that our lone student representative on the board of trustees and also on that search committee had been in favor of this individual who had been the president of a very small college and who had been the senator of a state that nowhere near remotely the size of Florida in terms of population or GDP or anything of the sort. Just, I mean, comparing Nebraska to Florida is like what? Anyway. So basically, the Student Senate was at least unanimous in us condemning the search committee, and we were also unanimous in condemning the student body president for basically endorsing just Ben Sass.
What was the student body president's name who endorsed Ben Sass's?
Oh, Lauren Masters. Yeah. And so this also led to outrage from the people within her own party, within Lauren's party. So Lauren's vice president, there we go, Dana Bedell, who, funny enough, I went to high school with him, and sort of got a small intro to UFSG through him. But he condemned Lauren. I might be wrong, but I think he served as the first openly gay student body vice president. I might be wrong about that. I'm not sure if there were others before him, but I can. But so basically, he condemned her because of the fact that he was gay and so was speaking as a representative of that community. And so her treasurer, Lauren's treasurer, Ciara Cantaneni, also condemned her. Notably, Dana Bedell would also become the Gator Party president for the spring 23 election. Although he was not the president on paper, there was another person who was Gator Party president, Thomas Woltermuth, who is also going to be a little relevant in a few. And also the System Party, or at least the Gator Party, not anymore, but they used to have this trend of whoever was their VP was actually the president in the public eye, but the Gator Party president was just someone else. We believe it was a block leader, but we don't really know. Anyway, so then also the Senate president condemned Lauren as well, The Senate president being the former student body president, Olivia Green. And so major officials within Lauren's party were condemning her, and students also were protesting this election, and students were also meeting up with Lauren to basically ask her to not vote in favor of Ben Sasse. And despite all of that, she still went ahead and voted for Ben Sasse in the confirmation hearing for Ben Sasse. I spoke against Ben Sasse during the Board of Trustees meeting. I believed that he had he didn't have the qualifications to serve as president of such a university like this one. I believe that his background as a politician didn't help in unifying the student body. Even if, for example, Kent Fox, who was the previous president, was not a Democrat or didn't support certain progressive issues, he didn't openly state or actively state things that were harmful towards these communities. He always at least tried to maintain this sort of campus unity, this sort of neutral figure head, which I believe that's what most university presidents should be, or at least what university presidents should be in most situations, sort of as a unifying figure. But instead, Ben Sasse had this whole political history behind him. So as a result, I didn't feel confident about his nomination, and I did tell him as well that if he did get selected, he would have a hill of trust to climb. A quote that got a lot of attention through media, but was never credited to myself. But I digress. Eventually, after he was confirmed, the Change Caucus did pursue an impeachment against the student body president, Lauren Masters. I don't think I signed on to the impeachment, only because I did ask for her to resign, but I didn't sign on to the impeachment simply because I wasn't fully I wasn't fully sure of the sort of legal argumentations made in the impeachment, but that's only because I was looking at it mainly through a legal sort of lens rather than a passionate or sort of personal stance. I mean, I would have impeached her if it came down to it, but would have needed different grounds, or at least better grounds to do so. So that was sort of the big part in sort of the lead up to the spring election. Then I think DEI was also another big portion for spring 23, sort of because of the state intrusion into academic freedom and all that. So we honed in on that as well during that campaign. And then another part was also the student org budget crisis that always seems to be coming up because of the YAF versus UF lawsuit from 2019. We had John Delgado as our treasurer candidate that year, who was one of the organizations slash people who were, or his organization, Florida Rocket Lab, at the time, was liquid prop. Yeah, I think it was liquid prop. Basically, his org, because the university had changed the designation from the USSOs and GRSOs, General Registered Student Organizations, and University-Sponsored Student Organizations, because they had made these distinctions. His organization, which was a university-sponsored org, had lost funding, or at least some of the funding that they got, because they could no longer rely on student government to fund them, but rather have to depend on the university to fund them. And so we in Change Party wanted to find a solution for this issue. Quite frankly, the solution is very complicated, and the whole issue is very complex, and finding a solution is going to be very complicated, is what I meant to say. And I don't know if a regular student might be the one to find a solution. You're definitely going to need an expert or something to find a way to solve the issue, for sure here. But I think those three overarching issues were, I think, what eventually led to us winning 30 seats in the spring. And also another factor that isn't really discussed a lot is just the retention that we actually had for the fall, from the fall election that led to us winning, period. Unfortunately, the retention wasn't enough for us to secure a pure majority, so 51 seats, but it was enough for us to win a majority, at least a plurality of the 100 seats that are allocated in the Senate. And so, essentially, what I mean by the retention issue is that in at least the Indie Party, or the Independent Party, or the Opposition Party, whatever you want to call it, typically we have the issue of just not being able to replace our senators if they lose their seats. So in the Senate, there's the Replacement Agenda Committee, which is composed of the Senate President, the pro tempore as the chair, the two members at large, and the party leaders of the Senate. And so typically what this means is that the majority party can elect the four Senate elected positions. They can just elect them, and they will have a 5-1 majority all the time. And so even though they pose as though they're unbiased and objective, the committee is the most biased committee in the world. I mean, all you have to do to find out whether someone is going to be affiliated with your party or without your party is just look up their Instagram, check if they're in a sorority or fraternity, check if they're affiliated with Florida Blue Key, check if they're affiliated in any way with anything remotely close to the system, and you know that the RNA committee that is dominated by the system / Gator Party / Vision Party, whatever they want to call themselves, they are going to pick one of those people every time, or at least a majority of the time. The same is true for the flip side if you're affiliated or not affiliated with any of the two parties, so if you're a pure independent, or if you are affiliated clearly with a Change Party or with the other third parties, they are not going to accept you through the committee. They are going to just reject you. That has been the case, or that was, for the most part, the case throughout the entire time that the system, whatever, had the majority in the Senate. And so anytime there is a vacancy, whether that is from our side or their side, they can just find someone to apply through the committee and they will get through the Senate and the Senate will approve them. Meanwhile, there is no way for us to punish our people. Our side, if we lose a member, that is a permanent loss. That is not going to come back. So, after the fall election, we had lost about 6 people. So from 27, we went down to 21. But because we won, we lost 8 people because we had 49 coming in after 30. So 19 plus 30 is 49, yeah. So we lost about that amount, but the Gator Party hadn't been able to replenish their people, at least not enough for us to not get a majority. They did find someone for grad and family housing, actually, during the meeting of the validation. So they, instead of us having a 3-seat majority, we had a 2-seat majority. Then, of course, because of our vet med slate fill, we had a 1-seat majority. So it ended up being 48-47. So, yeah, so that's sort of the factors that led to us winning the 2 elections and also winning the majority.
All right. So could you describe how you became Senate President and what was the system's reaction to that process?
Yes. So, basically, after the election, during this time, actually, I served as a deputy party leader. When Faith Corbett ran for the student body presidency for that election, I decided to not run for treasurer, even though I was tapped to be the student body treasurer, because John Brakeman, yet again, in the summer before, summer 2022, he had authored a Resign to Run Act, basically stating that if you ran for the executive branch, like if you ran for president, then or treasurer or vice president, and you were serving as a senator, then you would have to resign your Senate seat after the validation of the results, and you would lose your seat. And although I had been asked to run for treasurer alongside Faith, I declined because of the act, because of the Resign to Run Act. This is not new information, I don't think. So I've stated this before. But basically, that was a major factor that sort of led me to become Senate President, because I think if I had ran and potentially lost, then I don't know if we would have gotten a majority in the first place, first of all. And I don't know if we would have then been able to elect a Senate President, period. But I like to think of it as because of Faith, that she ran, I was able to serve as Senate President, and I was able to basically run the Senate. So, shout out Faith. But basically, the system in the March 7th, prior to the March 7th meeting, they decided not to pursue a double meeting. Now, I've had conversations with people in the system, and they allege that they did not do it with any intent to actually deprive us of having Senate leadership elections that meeting, albeit I don't know how much I believe them. But I tend to believe that that the system deliberately postponed Senate leadership elections because they just knew we had one, and so they didn't want to face that reality. And so they broke tradition basically by just not holding a double meeting on March 7th. And so we ended at 11, and then spring break was the next week. And then the week after was the meeting we came back on March 21st. And so the day before, I had been contacted by the pro tempore, who is now acting Senate President, Catherine Giordano, and she basically, our party, we have elected Evan Rafanon to serve as our party leader, and Nadia Nair to serve as the deputy leader. However, I don't believe we had turned in the form for Nadia Nair. So, as a result, we, for some reason, the system tried to convince me that I was still the rightfully elected deputy leader of the Change Caucus, and as a result, I had to show up to RNA, even though I was under the belief that I was not the party leader, or the deputy party leader of the Change Caucus. So, for, I guess, Senate side, I was recognized as party leader this entire time, before Evan was officially party leader. So you could say that I was acting party leader of the Change Caucus during the majority. But anyway, back to the point being that basically Evan was allegedly in Jacksonville and could not make it to RNA. No comment. And I was allegedly out of town. So there was nobody who could attend the Replacement and Agenda Committee from our side. But because the Replacement and Agenda Committee was meeting to set the agenda for the next meeting, but they didn't have 4 members, they only had 3, because they needed one of us, either me or Evan, to show up. They couldn't meet quorum. And so the meeting for the 21st was a quote skeleton agenda, which basically didn't feature anything. It's just a blank agenda with nothing on it. The Senate President, the acting Senate President, she was very disappointed and very angry at us because she had left her dad for an internment ceremony, I think, and she used that fact against both me and Evan because she had to drive up and not be able to see her dad get interned. And then what happened during that meeting, the 21st, and then essentially that meeting was just like filibustered because all the members of the GARE caucus and some of their allies from that weren't elected officials had registered for public comment. It was over 50 people. Some of the people registered were from the Change Caucus, but there weren't enough of us to have been the ones responsible for any delay. Then that meeting ends because we reach 11, the building closed, so we had to leave. Then on March 28th, we come back and it's only our side that's there. The only person who shows up from the Gator Caucus is the acting Senate President, Catherine Giordano, because she kind of had to be there. Nobody from the Gator Caucus showed up. So then we come to the next week. And in that week, the Gator Caucus apparently has a schism within their ranks because they, well, not really, they started, 8 members of their side affiliated with the Liberation Party. And so the Liberation Party somehow had a caucus that included the Judiciary Vice Chair and the Budget Chairwoman. Okay. And they had elected a party leader. But we were able to thwart that scheme because we found out about it via the website because it listed their new party affiliations. And so what we did was have at least 12 or 13 or 15 of our caucus members disaffiliate with the Change Party and join the Liberation Party. And we selected Jonathan Stevens to serve as the Liberation Party leader. And so he was able to just present the form to the acting Senate president, or technically the acting chair of the Rules and Agenda Committee, who was one of the member at larges still remaining. So this scheme was just to allow for the committee to have quorum because you just needed 4 people if there were 7 members. So 4 is quorum. And so we were able to just come in, present the form, walk out, and yet again, no quorum. So, that was a fun time. I also joined in on the scheme to help retake the Liberation Party. Then that meeting comes by, and what we do is we think everything's going fine. We were told by advising that things are going to be fine, that this is going to be the end of the delay. It was not. It was not the end of the delay. We had another shenanigans come about by the Gator Caucus just straight up walking out. They packed their bags. They just walked out. And so during this time as well, we had yet again party leadership meddling with caucus affairs because not only did they help elect who would be in caucus leadership by sort of pre-selecting people, but also they sort of conjured up this scheme to try to help elect me as Senate President that meeting on April 4th. Needless to say, I was not informed of their tactics or of their plans. So essentially, even though there was no quorum, they wanted to elect me and everybody else for Senate leadership. So I stood by the assessment that my election was at least valid simply because there was no quorum call that was validly made that could show that there was no quorum. However, the certain members of the what we dubbed the Kangaroo Caucus or Shadow EB, whatever, they wanted to proceed and wanted to suspend the rule for quorum and whatnot. And basically, I had to sort of uphold the rules of the Senate, and I started to just deny these motions simply because they weren't valid in general. And this, after this meeting ended, student government and advising operations just did not recognize me as Senate president, regardless of whether or not it had actually been valid, simply because SGAO should not really have that authority. But because allegedly this is a student government, not a student government and advising, like student government or student and advising government, but I digress. Basically, there was a Supreme Court case filed against me, challenging my election by John Brinkman and another former senator with the Gator Party. John Brinkman was aided by Noel Feinberg in this endeavor. And basically, he tried alleging that the meeting did not have quorum, and that as a result, my election was invalid. I alleged that John Brinkman did not have standing to actually bring the case forward, so he was actually dismissed from the case because he did not have standing. However, the other person did have standing, properly so. I never alleged that she didn't. And but even though the case for her was relating for replacement and agenda, forcing the replacement agenda committee to meet, which they denied because that was just a faulty reading of the previous case law, they still used the fact that she had standing and brought this one case to encompass the entire case. And that's the only thing I disagree with in the entire case, personally, but that's just me. So the Supreme Court was able to then use that to then declare my election invalid, and then to enjoin the Senate from meeting, and then force the party leadership of both the Gator and the Change Caucus to come together and to meet and to form a contract to sort of figure out what to do for the Senate. And so during this meeting, there were 4 people total. I was not involved. It was Mohammed Faisal and Evan Rafanan for the Change side, and then it was Santiago-Perez and Catherine Giordano. Santiago-Perez was the Gator Party leader, and Catherine Giordano was the acting Senate president, as I've stated before. And so they met and they hashed out the agreement. Originally, they sort of agreed that I would be fine for Senate president, and then they were not sure of who to agree to for pro tempore. Originally, Mohammed Faisal had been selected by the caucus to be the pro tempore, and the Gator Party did not want that, or at least the 2 representatives didn't want that. So they cycled through our nominees from that election, which included Jonathan Stevens, and Jonathan did not get favorable reviews, so to speak, from the representatives of the Gator Party. And finally, they find the wild card, Nathan McGuinness, who also had ran in that election in the caucus, but we didn't really expect him to be the eventual pro tempore. But the Gator caucus was like, yeah, we like him, after being shown an image of this individual. Then for every other, and then the MAL, the members at large, would go to them. Originally, actually, the Gator caucus, or the representatives, wanted to have a split president pro tempore, so they wanted me to be the president, and then they wanted Blake Cox, who is currently the pro tempore, to be my pro tempore. But there was an email that a member of the YDSA had sent out to the class senators, basically begging the members of our class senate, people from the class constituency that were affiliated with us, to basically reject any sort of compromise with the Gator Party. And so the change representatives were able to pose this as like, listen, we have people who don't want our front-facing people, the front-facing leadership to be from a different party. So we want two top-facing positions from our party. And the Gator Party agreed. They were like, sure, we'll give it to you. So that's how Blake Cox did not get pro tempore. Blake Cox had actually served as the majority party leader for the term prior. And he was a very, very respectable and admirable guy, actually. I don't have anything really bad to say about him, unlike other people in the system. But digressing. So then the MALs, the members at large, we agreed to give it to them. Then they realized that they can also negotiate other positions. So that includes committee assignments and chairs. So we agreed to also, or they agreed to also have the judiciary chair be given to a member of the Change Caucus, because from what I recall, apparently none of their people actually knew how to really write legislation, nor were very expert at it. So, and they knew who we were going to nominate for it. And they were insinuating that we would obviously have Jonathan serve as the judiciary chair. So, yeah. And in fairness, he was a very qualified individual. So, there's that. Then the other committee chairs are given to the Gator Party. And then we also agreed to pass a bill regarding the party switching, and we also agreed to have the composition of the budget committee be split 4-4, plus the share being for Gator, so 5-4 ultimately. And yeah, that's basically that for the what that was, that compromise meeting. And so the meeting afterwards, so the Senate meeting afterwards, things go smoothly and everybody gets elected as stated in the contract. And the next meeting afterwards, we have our RNA meeting, and all the chairs are selected from the proper parties, and they are confirmed in the next meeting. And so that meeting, and that was the last meeting of the spring semester, and that meeting we also approved some, but not a majority of Olivia Green's cabinet, which sets the backdrop for summer 23.
All right. So could you talk a little bit about summer 23 and your term as Senate President, the insights you gained serving that capacity? Yeah, the insights you gained serving that capacity.
Yeah, so basically, summer 23 sort of began with a judiciary committee that was not functioning. There was no judiciary committee because all the members had left for the summer. And so throughout the entirety of summer A, the committee could not meet because there was no quorum for it. And as a result, because there was a Supreme Court case that was filed by 20 District A members, basically saying that they were malapportioned, aka they weren't given the proper representation that they needed, that they wanted to strike the current apportionment for that fall election and create a map that had about 20-something District A senators, and District B would get like 3, District D 4, District C 2. Basically, this was a ploy to easily get a majority for the Gator Party or the System Party because District A is the most populous district with the more, well, not the most populous actually. Well, technically, yes, it was because of the apportionment that John Brinkman made, which basically involved merging District E, which encompassed every zip code except the ones that were listed in District A, B, C, D, because John Brinkman said that it'd be better for the representation, but realistically, you were lumping in what was about 30,000 students into a district that had 4,000, so creating this super massive district of 40,000 plus students almost. And yeah, so the Supreme Court was like, well, actually, we filed a counter petition, Jonathan did, and so Thomas Wildermuth, who I mentioned before, he was the one representing these 20 District A students in the court, and basically read off a paper arguing that basically they needed these 20-something senators to represent them. Jonathan basically argued that no, we should have the Senate be the one to handle this. And the court agreed. The court agreed that the Senate should be the one deciding this case rather than the court. And so this court sent the matter for apportionment to the Senate. And then the Judiciary Committee is the one normally who handles apportionment, but because of the fact that it didn't have quorum, I formed an ad hoc committee to handle apportionment. That was my first ad hoc committee, actually. And I suggested the membership should be split evenly with Jonathan as the chair. So it was 3-3 plus Jonathan. And originally, John Brinkman was actually on that apportionment committee for the Gator Party. Then the party leader, Bronson Alaman, texted me, being like, John can't commit. I'm going to put in Lily, if that's fine with you. And I'm like, or Liliana Clark, who was the Rules and Ethics chairwoman. And I said, sure, that's fine with me. So the committee was tasked with sort of reviewing data from the registrar's office and trying to create an apportionment map. Unfortunately, after basically spending the entire summer, the Gator Caucus did not care about the data because they thought it was faulty because of some errors that were present, even though the census data also has errors as well, which still doesn't stop Congress from apportioning. Doesn't stop the Congress from giving or allocating the seats that each state should have, and doesn't stop the state legislatures from apportioning or from drawing the maps for each state. I digress. But they instead suggested this at-large map of 37 off-campus senators. And ultimately, that is what would become the Fall 23 map. So they were able to delay long enough for the apportionment that we created, which also included at-large seats, just 2 of them, to account for the people who weren't actually represented within the zip codes that, because of the quote-unquote faulty data. So that was part of the summer. Then we also had the budget. So originally in summer A, we had plans to just change the budget, and but we wanted to do it for the upcoming fiscal year rather than the fiscal year that we're basically the 23-24 fiscal year, not the 24-25 fiscal year. So, which is currently still not complete because of what happened. But basically, we tried to amend that fiscal year budget. We did not do great because the people who were supposed to help when working with that, didn't actually do the work that was needed, and we kind of flopped in that regard. So yeah, then we tried again for the next fiscal year budget, which is the one that we're going to be entering now. And then, we had people who, from our own party, who weren't voting in line with us. I'll touch on that in a bit. And so as a result, we had issues with getting majorities in votes. But during the vote for the amendment for the budget, I saw that there was a majority, and that's what the rules allow. And the rules say ways to challenge my ruling, but the proper rules weren't followed, and as a result, I ended up saying that there was a majority, and that vote passed. And so, but according to the voter record, they disagree with my assessment of the vote, and that's when Nyla Pierre, the student body treasurer, had line item vetoed the portions that were amended from that vote, and as a result, line items like accent, SGP, student organizations were actually struck out, and they currently have no budget. Well, actually, student orgs do, not SGP though. SGP still is stuck with no money, and accent, and I think class cancels, and the president's project sign. But anyway, that's something not for me to figure out anymore. Then what else? There was also a major factor with the fact that, or a major leadership vacuum as a result of us winning the majority. So basically, because I probably would have been party leader for summer if not for the fact that I was Senate president. So there weren't really people who were experienced enough to serve within the capacity as a party leader. So we elected the party kangaroo caucus, quote unquote, had helped elect a freshman senator who would later run for student body president from our side. And she had no real experience within the caucus leadership role, aside from being the legislative director. But yeah, so it was sort of like a huge learning curve for her, and yeah, so we had to navigate that. And there were many just meetings that I had to hold with her included, and with Bronson and Olivia Green. And a lot of these meetings were just very degrading, because that's what the system did during this period. It was just Olivia Green often berating us, either in the meetings or even in the Senate floor, also threatening to file cases against us, which she never did, and never will, I guess, anymore, because she graduated just like me. It was a difficult time for me as well, mainly because I had started a job off campus, and this job I was just doing it to gain money for myself, to sustain my income, and to also supplement the income that I was getting as Senate president, which, for the record, it's not a lot. It's pretty bad wage, especially for the amount of hours you have to put in. But I was noticing that people from the system had who knew me for commenting on Yik Yak and on that social media app, saying derogatory or mean-spirited things about myself. And so I felt discouraged and very just demoralized seeing those type of messages, simply because, like, why? Like, why are you making fun of the fact that I work a job? It also just revealed, like, the sort of privilege these people have within the system, because they don't really ever have to face these kind of struggles of having to work these type of odd jobs, or having to, having to work to make their ends meet, or to make future ends meet, in my case. There was also just the pushback that I faced, probably because of my party affiliation, even if they want to disagree, from student government advising and operations. Specifically Jackie Phillips. She serves as the Senate advisor, but she served as the Impact Party Senate president, and which was affiliated with the Florida Blue Key Party. So I knew that coming in, she would probably be biased, and I was not disappointed to find out that she was biased against me. Because, I believe I've seen her communicating with members of the Gator Party / Vision Party through Snapchat, which conveniently deletes public records that may exist, but also student government advising operations communicates amongst themselves using Snapchat. So that includes James Tiger, for example, talking to Jackie Phillips. James Tiger also posed a lot of issues for me by sending condescending emails and just, in general, trying to portray himself as this smarter guy. And then I would reply back with, like, no, you're not that smart kind of response. Basically refuting and rebutting his arguments, and he would simply not take it as he wouldn't take that as like defeat. He'd still kind of respond, like, sort of answers one of my concerns. But some instances of, like, Jackie, for example, meddling in my affairs or my leadership or my decision-making processes, I should say, was, for example, a decision I had made to write signing statements. If you know, in the federal government, the U.S. president writes signing statements sometimes for bills that they sign into law, basically stating, like, I support this a lot, blah, blah, blah. I tried doing something similar, but eventually Jackie came to me being like, there are some people concerned that, we don't really know what authority this is coming from, and that people think that this is part of the Senate statement, which we don't want that to be the case, so we're going to have to take them down from the website. And I disagreed with that notion entirely, but it was a decision purely made by student government advising operations, not made by me. Additionally, when I was towards the tail end of my administration, when the Senate couldn't meet quorum consistently, there were just many emails sent that were sort of like, I'm disappointed in the Senate's inability to meet quorum. It's very disheartening that the Senate has been locked in gridlock for all these months, which were very unhelpful because she wasn't doing anything to sort of, like, help in the process. She was just, like, I hope y'all can solve your issues amongst yourself kind of thing, and not really being an advisor, more of a just, I guess, being unhelpful generally. James also sent several emails throughout my term. For example, he sent an email basically outlining issues with Bill, specifically the graduate and professional summer credit exemption bill, and he basically stated that he thought this would be unconstitutional and that there were issues. The Judiciary Sheriff, Jonathan Stevens, he responded proposing an amendment, and James said, that sort of assuages one of the concerns. That's what I meant by that earlier. But eventually, funny enough, after the Senate passed the bill, Olivia Green would parrot a lot of the same arguments made by James Tiger, which was also an interesting trend every time that something that SGAO communicates is typically parroted and repeated by people in the system. It's almost like they're puppets. But what do I know? This also happened when, for example, during the validation meeting, she wanted us to extend the time for the Senate, for the rights union to close, but we had to pay $300 for it. I thought that was a responsible use of student body funds, but the incoming Vision Party leader, this was after the rebranded as well, by the way. The incoming Vision Party leader, Aaron Amster, suddenly after we had that discussion with Jackie and me and Nathan told Jackie that we weren't going to extend the hours for the rights, suddenly Aaron Amster came in and emailed Olivia Green asking for her to pay for the $300. And Olivia Green responded in a very nice manner, not really, to us basically being like, hey, we didn't want this. So yeah, and then Olivia Green wasted $300 because we didn't meet quorum that night. But it was very interesting that Jackie was the one pushing for us to get the rights open till 2 a.m. and then suddenly the system found a way to get the rights open till 2 a.m. But that's just the small examples of a trend I've noticed. What else? Yeah, just like the system parroting arguments that SGAO gives them, and anytime there was a suggestion, like the system would try to do it anyway, in their own way, like seemingly coming from them, but not really if you actually knew the context. So those are some of the insights I gained from being in that role, which, yeah.
All right. So how would you say your Latina and non-binary identity, in fact, impacted your time at UF and in UF student government?
Yeah, I would say that it impacted it because I tried to sort of like be a voice for this community. In fact, I was one of the few Change Party people who was of that identity within the Senate. But not only that, I was one of the most prominent because I was in multiple leadership roles within the party. I think that, navigating this space as someone who wasn't born here in Florida or in the mainland to begin with, and sort of I felt like there was a sort of imposter syndrome to begin with. So I was like, am I even supposed to be up here right now? Or am I supposed to even be in this space? Just a lot of pressure for me to sort of make sure that I could like, set an example for people after me, because I served as the first like Hispanic, like queer like Senate president. So there were prior Hispanics who served before me as Senate president, but serving as the first like person within that intersection was very like humbling, because I just wanted to make sure that my term wasn't like that it would be remembered for the good things, not for the bad things, and that to make sure that I can show that people within this role could definitely succeed. And also serving as an INTI to show that you don't have to follow the system to be successful within student government or within the University of Florida. You can be successful in many other ways outside of the system as well. Like, I didn't want to be tokenized. I didn't want to be like just another random person here. I wanted to make sure that people after me knew that they could look back on my leadership, my role, and sort of have a good example to look at. And being a good example also means, making sure that they can look at what I did and improve upon it as well. So I think those kind of pressures and expectations that I kind of imposed on myself, which led to like how I served in the role. And I don't think that people who don't have these identities as I do would probably have those type of like pressures on themselves, simply because like there's not a lot of, well, there is a lot of Latinos here in Florida, but like there's not a lot of Latinos who like make it this far into student government. And so,
So speaking of learning from your experience at UFSG, is there anything you wish you would have done differently?
I mean, there is definitely a lot of like things I wish I could have done differently. I mean, I wish I was more stern on apportionment, for example. I wish that I had been more like firm in wanting to just push through apportionment regardless of the Gator Party's like objections. But my general like attitude of like being nice to people regardless was sort of hindering me in pursuing that goal of getting apportionment done. So there's that. I mean, I also wish that, maybe I had, there are some rulings that I made as Senate President that I have to make quick on the spot that maybe nowadays I wish I hadn't made, but honestly, that's just the thing of like, when you're under the pressure, you just have to make a decision. And as long as and some of them I kind of live with, but some of them I'm like, I could have done it differently. Maybe I also feel like now I should have done a little more pushback against student government advising operations. I feel like there was definitely a lot of just things that I speak about now that I probably could have spoken up back then and maybe changed that culture a little bit. But I mean, we're here now, so it's like I try not to dwell too much on the past like that, but also I can't help stop thinking about it,
Yeah. And so you've now graduated UF. So how has UF student government impacted the trajectory of sort of your post-grad career, and sort of what are you planning to do after the University of Florida?
Yeah, so I'll just touch upon what I want to do, and then I'll answer it backwards. So basically, right now I plan on continuing working to sort of save up for law school. I want to go to law school within the next year. I'm going to continue studying for the LSAT as well. Ideally, I want to be in the T14 law school. I'm not going to return to UF law, nor am I going to any other Florida law school. I want to move out of the state. I might return in the future to Florida, but definitely do not want to do law school here. And how did SG sort of like help me for this? What can I take away? So basically, I think that a lot of the legal, just the ability to serve as a legislator in a legislative role kind of ordeal helped me sort of like understand what is like short-term and long-term implications for like legislation and how this can affect the future of like many people's lives as well. Because eventually I do want to also probably serve in a public office. So having that insight is very helpful for me, especially if I want to pursue that career path. In terms of like legal path, I mean, it helped me refine and work my argumentation style and also my logical reasoning in terms of like using evidence that I have to help me make arguments based on that. Using foundational documents such as like statutes or constitutional provisions to again, make the best argument to push my like cause or my case. And in terms of campaigning, I think that being in every campaign since fall 21, I think that that also helped me just learn a lot about like what kind of decisions go into a campaign, what kind of like resources are needed, and just like the kind of environments that I want to be in when I work in a campaign, because the environments within change aren't all fine and dandy. There are a lot of things that can be improved upon, and that makes me like recognize what work environments I want to be in the future if I work in a campaign as well, and how to like try to navigate those as well. I mean, I think that every campaign is still a learning experience, so these campaigns in SG are definitely very foundational to future campaigns I want to work in, and just generally I can apply it to other workspaces, but yeah.
All right. Is there anything we didn't cover in this interview that you'd like to talk about? Is there any message you'd like to give to future students in student government?
Yeah, I'll just close off with this. I mean, it might seem like bleak to try to like take on a whole system that is so entrenched that has control over all three branches, the legislative, judicial, and the executive branch. But ultimately, I mean, the people in the independent movement are used to failure. They're used to challenges, and what keeps us going is not winning. It's the fact that we're fighting for a cause that we know is right and we know resonates with the majority of this campus, even if they don't vote. The majority of this campus actually does not live on Brown campus per apportionment data. They actually live sometimes very off campus. And they don't really have the accessibility to go to a polling location. And so I guess this is my first advice. Try to figure out a way to make it more accessible for these people to vote, whether that may be online voting or whether that may be making absentee balloting a lot more accessible. You have to figure out a way to get these people who just normally don't vote to vote. Next is making sure that when you are in a legislative capacity that you learn how to make the right connections and use your political capital that you gain through student government effectively. It's not effective to waste your energy yelling at people in Senate. It might feel nice. I won't deny that. But there is no point in yelling at people every time, because you're not going to get anything. You're just going to get them resentful at you, and eventually they might want to punish you. So just making sure that, you use your energy wisely and be cognizant of how you use your time as well within student government, because there are a lot of endeavors I try pursuing that I have to immediately or quickly drop, and some endeavors I pursued for much longer and eventually didn't go anywhere, and I still had to drop them. So knowing how to use your time to make sure that you don't end up hating yourself later on because you just wasted your time is very crucial. And again, at the end of the day, just like knowing what you're fighting for is not for it's not for yourself. I mean, sure, you can fight for yourself to be, more competent in the political process. I mean, I got a lot from my experience at SG, so I mean, I benefited in that way. But knowing that you are fighting for people to be well represented at the student government, to be able to realize that student government has a lot of untapped potential and a lot of unlocked potential that the system is the one holding it back from unleashing. And recognizing as well that SG has a lot of power in sort of influencing the decisions of leaders within this campus, whether that is through Division of Student Life or through the Board of Trustees, such as with the student body president role, and even within the city as well. A lot of power is held within the top administrative roles within SG that gives them access to just a lot of people, a lot of stakeholders within the community. And so recognize that, it's important to try to, ensure that these positions are held by people who have the best interests for the student body in mind. And yeah.
All right. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.